Hey, welcome to Growing a Fruitful Brand, where we discuss how to create and grow a brand that makes the world a better place for you, your customers, and your employees. I'm Ben Luters, founder and art director of Fruitful Design and Strategy, and I'm super pumped about today's guests. Rick Knudtson and Dusty Davidson are both serial entrepreneurs who helped start the Omaha-based WordPress hosting company, Flywheel, over 10 years ago. Since then, they're able to scale the company, sell it to WP Engine, successfully exit, and help another growing tech company called Workshop. Today, we get into the nitty-gritty of acquisition. How, when, and why to sell? How much are you worth? How do you scale a company that would be valuable to a potential buyer? And be sure to stick around to the end to hear Rick and Dusty reflect on their lives after Flywheel. Rick, Dusty, welcome to Growing a Fruitful Brand. Thanks so much for being here in the hallowed halls of Flywheel, right?
It's fruitful now, but yeah, it's a trip down memory lane. Love it.
It's good to be back.
Yeah.
This used to be a closet.
It's still kind of a closet.
I mean, let's be honest.
We like what you've done with the place.
It's way better.
Very good.
Thanks. What's your favorite change?
Oh man, put us on the spot.
Dude, that conference room is sexy. That's a really... We had a conference room made out of rope. And this is the part where you can I'll send you a picture. You can put it up on the video.
You didn't have private conversations.
Good, and I'll be honest. I said this earlier. It's cool to see it back. When we moved in here, there was, I think, 12 of us, and it's a really beautiful space for 12 people. But when you have 65 people up here, it goes from being beautiful to being just really annoying. And we made the best use of the space that we had available to us, but to be honest, it's fun to see it with 12 people in it again, or whatever. Honestly, it's beautiful again.
It's almost built for an agency, to be honest.
That's why we took
Omaha, yeah, totally. Yeah.
We
felt
wanted
like one of our customers.
Want to feel like our customers, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we love it.
If a State Farm agency had moved in here, or State Farm agent had moved in here afterwards, I would have died inside. But when I heard you guys were taking over, I was like, oh my gosh.
All right, we're good.
Oh, it's so perfect. It worked out really well, and it's good to be back.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, welcome. Obviously, you guys founded Flywheel. You're both kind of serial entrepreneurs. You founded Flywheel in 2012. Is that right?
Yep.
We started up in 2013, so we're about the same age here in some ways. But today we want to get into scaling a tech company in Omaha, also selling a tech company, getting acquired, and life after that as well a little bit, because you guys have gone on to do more things as well. And I'd love to hear how that's gone for you. So first off, how did you guys meet?
Well, I had worked for a bit. I was always a technologist, a software engineer. I'd worked for a bit in corporate America, and then ultimately hated that and had started my first company called BrightMix with a partner, Kevin Zing. And, we were a dev shop. We did a lot of work for creative folks. Like we were the developers behind the scenes of a lot of folks like Fruitful, a lot of back in the day, Secret Penguin or Oxide or... Wet Cheer, like these kind of companies that grew up out of Omaha.
What Cheer? Oh,
yeah. So let's go back, right?
I love it.
And we did a lot of this, just like tech work for those creative folks. So we met a lot of really creative folks over that time period, and a lot of people that I'm really, really dear friends with to this day. And we were just growing that little tech consultancy, and ended up hiring. Rick, got connected with Rick at a UNO career fair. He was going to school there. We had a booth.
That is so cute.
He came up.
It was adorable. Yeah.
He came up and he asked, what we were up to, and he'd heard of us, which was cool. And ended up hiring Rick as an intern, and then hiring our other partner at Flywheel, Tony Necker, as a software engineer
at BrightMix.
And so
I did not realize that
the three of us worked together at BrightMix for many years. We built a software product called Triple Seat together.
I remember that. Yep.
We went on to help kind of grow and nurture as well, and it's doing very well today. But that's the impetus. And then, fast forward a bunch of years, we kind of went our separate ways. Each kind of did consulting work, and got the band back together to start Flywheel. Rick had a cool idea. And
there's a good story about me working at Brightmix is I remember meeting Dusty at UNO and I had already decided that like I want to work at like an interesting creative company in Omaha. Like I'm not going to go work in corporate America. I'm going to do something interesting. You know, Brightmix was cool. What Cheer was cool. There's lots of cool like agencies in Omaha. And I sent an email to both Dusty and John Henry. Put him on the spot here on the podcast.
John Henry Mueller, for if you're listening.
And I said, hey, like I'm not doing anything this summer. Do you need an intern? And the funny thing is John Henry, this is very Dusty though. John Henry responded right away and was like, we aren't hiring anyone. I was like, okay. And Dusty took a week to respond. I was like, absolutely, come down and hang out. So I guess I'm gonna go work there. So that's, you know, so my life is kind of like, that was a fork in the road right there. I could have been hanging out with John Henry for many years, but
that would have just been a nightmare.
Oh, terrible.
You know, I mean,
can you
John Henry's the worst.
the worst.
He's just a mean guy. That's the vibe
Can you imagine being mentored from a creative standpoint by John Henry Mueller? It's like, it wouldn't have worked out for me
That's right.
at all.
Well, you know that, I mean, how I kind of got in this whole world and this whole scene was I won that big Omaha coloring contest that John Henry did with What Cheer. I was just a kid working in my basement for remotely, like
That's
before
fantastic.
remote was cool. He did that coloring contest, and I just wanted to go to Big Omaha so bad. Which obviously,
You
Dusty,
got your first ticket to Big Omaha.
that was
because you won a coloring contest.
That's how I met all you guys.
Amazing.
And so it was so fun for me because I looked up to John Henry and Drew Davies and like all those guys. I'd never met them. And then I was like sitting with them at Big Omaha, and it just like, oh man, the whole world opened up to me. It was like the coolest. I felt like the most, I won the golden ticket. It was so special.
That was a cool time in Omaha.
Very cool time.
And a lot of things sprouted from like that, you know, time frame, whether it was more agencies or Mastercraft.
Co-working.
Obviously, Flywheel came out of that.
Yep.
For the cool startups in Omaha. Yeah, it was cool.
Silicon Prairie News.
And a ton of friendships. I think that's the way I look at it. It's like all of the, I think, young men and women that were there at that time.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm still friends with the majority of them to this day. Like, and if I see them at a coffee shop or, you know, or we are on a podcast together or whatever, that's a really cool part of that. You know, I see John Henry a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Like
That's awesome.
He's
doing cool stuff at Pet Friendly.
He's working at a company called Pet Friendly now, and it's
fantastic.
like doing amazing work. And so that kind of evolution is really fun to see. And it's one of the reasons is Rick and I and Tony started Flywheel is, you know, you kind of got to work with your friends, right? Like this was like, you know, you can start a company in lots of different ways, but you know, the reality is like we had all of our friends were designers and agencies. So like
You might as well.
like it's what we knew, and it becomes a really cool way to, I think, build products for yourself and for people like you.
That's super cool. I mean, that's often what we say about Fruitful too. Is the same thing. We were just a bunch of buddies like hanging out, and so we just did a thing together. We might as well. But it's totally true that was happening a lot in Omaha at that time. Like it was popping up where people are just hanging out. Even like, you know, how Grain and Mortar started. It was, you know, Mike and Kristen are sitting over here and Camp Co-working, and Eric's over here, and you know, things just started happening. It was super fun and like inspirational to watch and be a part of. So let's focus in on Flywheel though. So tell me, how did Flywheel start? What was the problem that what is Flywheel and what was it trying to solve in the, you know, internet tech space?
Well, I think that in the simplest form, Flywheel was a better way to work with other developers building websites initially. You know, we were, like Dusty mentioned, Brightmix was building, you know, WordPress sites primarily at the time. I was working there, eventually became a freelance web designer, spent about a year doing that, building WordPress sites. And Tony was in the same boat. We were across the street from Good Twin, which is another creative agency, you know, throwback. But we had all these friends building these sites. And while I was freelancing, I was building a website for a client out in New York, Jessica Wyman, who happens to be one of the early team members at a company called Lever here in Omaha now, but she was out in New York running a small agency. And I like to say she was looking for cheap labor. So she called her friends in Omaha and said, hey, do you know anyone that builds websites? And I was like, me, I build websites. So we started partnering on some stuff in my freelance work. And then she passed over this like very big project. It was an architect in New York. It was the biggest contract I had ever seen. Wow. And I was freelancing and I was terrified of building this WordPress site, you know, and the potential of it getting hacked. which I had seen in the past.
Yeah.
This was 2011.
Right.
And WordPress was growing fast, targeted a lot. So anyway, wanted to build a website, but I was like terrified of what could happen with this architecture firm. And I knew that Dusty and Tony were far better engineers than I was.
Because your background's design and development, or you do both?
One would say that I got a degree in computer science, but I'm definitely more of a designer type. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So I was a front end web developer, you might describe it as. And, so I called Tony and Dusty and said, hey, I got this website. Can you help me make sure it doesn't get hacked? Let's build a secure version of hosting. Otherwise, it's going to go on GoDaddy or something like that. Right. And in that product, that thing became Flywheel, this hosting product. And once we had built it and the site was online and it was working and running smoothly, this realization that we can't be the only ones in the world that have this problem.
So you built that solution really for this one big...
Totally.
And you just baked the cost of that into the cost of the project, basically?
Yeah. I actually vividly remember saying I'll split the money. I don't need to worry about that as much as I worry about 6 months from now getting a call from the client saying that something's wrong with the website.
The site has turned into a Russian Cialis website.
That was the common example back then. So, so that problem was pretty acute for us at the time, but with our relationships in Omaha and just creative agencies in general, it was pretty obvious that WordPress was becoming so prevalent, and creative agencies just want to spend time designing, not worrying about hosting.
Oh gosh,
obviously.
Yes.
And we felt like there was a product there, and that's kind of what became Flywheel.
That's very cool. So when we talk about Flywheel, then you have this idea. Basically, you kind of created it to solve a problem that you had, and it's hey, maybe we could do something with this. When you decided to make it a company, make it a service, make it into something, did you always have in the back of your mind that you wanted to sell it someday? I'm really talking to people who might be thinking about selling their company or think about starting a company to sell. Is that something that you should kind of go into the company thinking, or is that something that kind of develops over time?
I think it's the nature of the style of company, right? So if you're a service company, you might not go into it think you're going to sell it. I think the reason why you start it, in a lot of cases, I've known lots of people who started, agencies or development firms. They started because they hate their job, and it's a way they can make more money and do the work that they want to do and work with the people they want to work with.
That's what I'm doing.
Number one, baseline. And they never go into it because they're going to sell. And also those businesses are more challenging to sell often because it's based on your work, your time. And so if you don't build great process, then it's harder to sell those businesses. With a company like Flywheel or Triple C, let's say to Flywheel, these are recurring revenue businesses. They're subscription businesses. They, we can, if you do it right, you don't have to be doing the work to make the money.
Right.
That lends itself to being able to sell more easily. I think that's one thing. Two is because of that, you're committing early on to raising venture capital dollars. Right? You're saying hey, in order to grow, we need to take on investors to do it. And if we're going to take on investors, then roughly speaking, you're committing to selling. And so I don't know that it was explicit. We didn't sit down day one and be we are selling this company, right? But I kind of think everybody knew that because of the type of company you're building and the type of partners that you're bringing on board, that it's kind of inevitable someday. And at the same time, and we can get into this, that it's always an option, or that that's always the thing, but you have no idea what it means. You have no it's you never even think about it. It sort of hits you in the face when it shows up, and you're oh shit, right? We were selling. That's a thing. Yeah. Because you're just so focused on building and growing in teams and product and customers, you don't think about it ever.
Yeah. But at the same time, when Flywheel was, exploding and was the cool, sexy company in Omaha, I'm sure you had people coming to you wanting to buy, right? Did you guys get multiple offers over the years, or how was that experience? Yeah,
you get to a certain size, and then once a month, somebody
it's true.
emails you or calls you or texts you and is we'd like to buy you or partner with you or whatever, and we were silly enough sometimes to go down that path and be like, yes, like people want us. And so you'd go down and you'd find out that they don't want to pay what you're worth or whatever the case is. And you just waste a lot of time. And so we got pretty good at like just being like, yeah. That's a distraction.
When people ask, why did you sell the company? Dusty kind of alluded to this idea that, it's the type of company. You raise venture capital money, right? What a lot of people don't realize is that the second you do that, you are signing up to give the money back at some point. Right? It's an investor. And there's lots of ways to do that. The maybe simplest form is to sell the company, but maybe you could find another investor to buy out that investor or something. But I think that, when you have a company that you can on paper say, I'll take $1 and I can earn you $2, predictably. Then it's a good reason to take investment, which is what Flywheel became. You're detached from hourly rates, in the agency world. So it really is about investing in the company and therefore like producing a bigger result over time.
Yeah.
So you kind of signed up for it the second that you signed a paper that said there's an investor in the company. At some point, you have to return that money. And so it's not that we didn't know that was a thing in the future.
Sure.
But it was a reality. So you try to build a good business on paper and you try to find great investors over time. And we always said to the company even, let's build something that, we don't have to think about that. If you build a good business, things tend to work themselves out.
Right.
And that was always our approach. But we had multiple people over time.
Yeah, and they would always come to you and they'd be like, and I'll make up numbers here, but like, they come to us and be like, we'll give you $10 million for your business today. I'd be like, no, our business, we're $20 million. Like, we'd sell today for $20 million. And they're like, no way, that's way too much. And we, at the time, were, let's say, doubling in size every year. And we did that for almost the entire life of Flywheel. So whatever we're doing at the time, we would say, like, we're worth double what you think we're worth. And they'd be like, no. And they'd be like, well, we'll just wait a year.
We'll just wait 12 months. And then we'll show you that we are worth that.
And then what would kind of happen is the next year they'd come back and they'd be like, well, we'll give you $20 million now. And you're like, no, you're not listening.
we told you.
It's $40 million. It's like, and the longer you wait, in a growing business, a SaaS business especially, like that's the nature of it. And when the markets are hot and there's lots of factors, but when over the period of Flywheel, we doubled in size nearly every year. And so you end up with a lot of people that want to buy, but they want to buy at yesterday's price. And we fell prey to that we were distracted by that a couple of times. But then we learned to be like, listen, put your heads down, build a great team, build a great product, acquire a lot of customers, treat them well, and good things will happen.
So spoiler alert, Flywheel was acquired by WP Engine eventually. What year was that? How long has that been?
June of 19.
Okay, of 2019. And so let's tell the story of that. I think that'd be really helpful for our listeners to just hear like how that goes. How do they approach you? What do those conversations look like? And I'd love to know just more about, the particulars of how that went down. How much did you sell for? That's what everyone wants to know, right?
Somewhere between $1 million and $1 billion.
Yeah. Roughly speaking.
I don't think there's any right or average or standard way that these kind of things go down. But, we weren't expecting to sell. In fact, we had a board meeting this day and we had decided that we're not selling for 18 months. And then we went to a party that like the kind of like happy hour after the board meeting. And I remember getting a text from the CEO of WP Engine, who I had met once or twice probably at like conferences. Like we weren't friends. We didn't have to talk a lot, but like
enough to have the phone number.
Well, he said email, like or whatever. It's like it's just on my phone. It's like, hey Dusty, love what you're doing. Would love to find a way to partner more. Like it's just the abstractest way to say like we want to buy you. And so we're at this, and it's just the board, like the Flywheel board. We're at like happy hour, and I would just turn to like Rick, and I was like, well, this is weird.
I guess we're selling.
And then honestly, 60 days later, we had sold the company.
Wow.
It went very quickly. And that's unusual, but like,
okay, I need to know more. Like how did that seems like such a big thing.
It is one of those things that it wasn't the first email that we got like that. For many years, we probably had realistically maybe a half dozen that were relatively serious.
Serious,
You
yeah.
know, and serious enough to like get maybe to the point where we could tell that they weren't going to pay the price that we wanted
Yeah.
or whatever the situation was. But, you know, we'd encountered WP Engine in the past. This email came in and we knew what it meant, you know, and the question at that point, you know, a partnership, right? Like, but at that point, we, like Dusty kind of alluded to, we were already, you know, well versed enough in this process of getting this type of email that we wanted to cut to the chase. To be honest, we were like, well, we're not going to, you know, worry about this unless it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And we had great respect for WP Engine in the market. They were the leader. They had built good products. It wasn't, you know, we had good respect, you know, from that perspective. But so I think that like that's why it kind of moved fast. Is we told them like we're not. What's this mean? You know, are we gonna have a real conversation or not? And that's why I think it moved fast. Is that we did cut to the chase. They did as well. And
Nobody wants to waste time. And
No.
and if everybody's reasonably sophisticated about it, like nobody wants to waste time. Like, and so you get to and in fact, like they came back with a price that was awful. Like,
yeah, they did.
Initially,
I remember that night.
I remember that night as well.
Because we'd already, you know, talked to our board. We already convinced us as partners and the team that, you know, the leadership group that we were going to sell the company, you know, and they were going to make a reasonable offer. And here we are, we get the offer. We're like, that's not even close.
So back up though, you don't have to say how much if you don't feel comfortable, but I am curious, how did you know how much you were worth? Like how does one know how to evaluate themselves? You know, like you it sounds like you saw that number and you knew instantly, you all knew we were worth more than this. How do you know?
I think there's two ways, at least as I think about it. One is that, you know, you get to a certain scale and you're a certain type of company, then you can look at the public markets. Like you can say, we are a software as a service company that's growing quickly, that's doing $25 million a year. You can look to the public markets and say, well, there's not $25 million companies in the public markets, but there's $100 million companies in the public markets that are worth $1 billion or they're worth 1.2 billion. Like you can look at like what the public market signal is for companies like us. That's probably like number one. And so if somebody comes back with a lowball offer, you can literally just be like, well, that's not what the market is.
There's 3 or 4 examples that say otherwise.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's probably pretty common though that you get a low ball at first, so you work your way up. And is that what you did?
I mean, like, if I was buying a company, that's exactly what I would do.
Yeah.
And so,
No one's blaming
when I'm
you.
buying anything, that's what
mad
I
about
would
the approach. I'm just like, and I'm super
Were you
happy.
insulted? Like, was it, or were you just kind
We
of
were
like, I get this
very
game.
insulted.
In the moment, I was very insulted.
But totally understood.
It's
Guys,
double-sided
it was
chess.
$5,000.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I just, you know.
$1, Bob.
Listen, it's like double-sided chess. Like everybody knows the game, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so the and the other component of it that's really important, and I think this is important both for the audience and for, you know, for people who are looking to be in this position, is like you got to understand as founders, like what's your number? Like what's like you can do the math, like you can do it in your head on like if this then this for my family. And you know, we've talked at length about like we have a fiduciary responsibility first to our families to provide and make sure that we don't do something stupid, because if it goes to zero, that's a problem.
I mean, you've been working for 10 years of your life. I have no investments in my life. It's literally my entire net
No
worth.
401k, like
wrapped up in this thing.
So you can't
Very similar to my story.
You know. So you are kind of, yes, there's a market price, but you also are thinking, well, I can't, you know, I've worked so hard for this. My family has supported me during this time.
I'm sure late nights and not seeing them on weekends
to
sometimes.
be
It has to be this number. So you
Personally.
you can certainly write that number down.
So did the three of you kind of have the same number in mind, or like, you know, did you agree?
I think roughly.
Yeah, I think,
Roughly.
yeah.
Okay, got it. That's good.
I mean, that's an important conversation. I mean, I think that on day one, no.
It was helpful, by the way, that
Over time, though, yes.
each of us had none of the three of us had ever had real success before. So if like somebody has no money and somebody has $100 million in the bank, then those numbers are different, right? Like it's like somebody's like,
I'm not good at math, but I can.
Has to have a B or
I'd be like, it's like boring if it's, not this. And you're like, that would be life-changing for me. So it's helpful in that case that all three partners, I think, we're in roughly the same, economic position, which was to say that like a life-changing amount of money and also I would say that none of the three of us had egos to the point. Like we run into a lot in founders and software companies, is egos that'll say like, well, you may be way past life-changing money, but you're going to shoot for the moon because like that's not enough, or like, there's an ego component to it. And none of the three of us had that. Like I think that we very much were aligned on like, wait, like once we hit a certain threshold, and it's real, because you can make up numbers and you can think about it in the abstract a lot. But like, once it's a bird in hand, then you come back to it and say like, man, like where do your real principles lie? Like, like where's your real fiduciary responsibility?
We also had had a really good respect for like what we built. Like I understood that it was rare. I understood that it was, in some ways kind of a card house. It's like you first time entrepreneur scaling something. So you're sitting on something that you are kind of watching grow organically, around you. And I certainly looked around often and be thinking, holy crap, like what did we create? And for me I was 30 when we sold, 23 when we started the company, with no experience. So I think a little bit for me was just along for the ride to experience this thing. And I had a great amount of respect for like, this is not me. This is bigger than me. This is, I'm lucky enough to be here, know? And for that reason, like you don't have this ego where it's like, clearly like I could run this thing for 10 more years. We can get this thing to wherever we want to go. No, it's like, we created something really special.
On that, like, can you tell me, in building something like Flywheel, which at the time of the acquisition, how big were you? Like how many employees approximately?
250, 300.
Okay, 250. I can barely wrap my mind around that,
Same.
10 employees, So, and it feels, I can feel the pressure though of like, man, these people are depending on me. We're depending on one another. This thing is growing bigger than I ever thought, So I'm just curious from your guys' perspective, what was that pressure like? What was that? Obviously you had super fun times because I've seen, the Nerf fights and all this kind of stuff, but I also know it's hard to do this, to build a company that scales and is looks good to someone that someone might want to buy. So how was that for the however many years, 7-8 years?
I mean, it's tough. It's all the things that you say, and it creates anxiety and stress and all of the things that go along with that. I think that I can speak for myself. Like I think I'm driven by that. Like I think that you're sort of like. And it does get better. Like when you're 10 people, you feel the pressure of individual payroll, right? Like when you're 300 people, you feel the pressure of like, if I had to lay off a third of my staff, it would be.
You start thinking in percentages.
So it's less, and yet you still don't forget the individual. Like it's weird to say, but there's it's less fragile. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And you've got scale and predictability. Then it's less about making individual bad decisions, and it's more about like what are the right big strategic decisions. And so, some people that wears on to the point where it's debilitating, and I think others, I think I put Rick and I in that category of like, it's motivating in a way, but it's tough. And a 300-person company is completely different problems than a 30-person company. And so one of the things that you realize is that what are the things that you actually enjoy? And it's not even the pressure that's the problem. It's like, well, is it even fun anymore? And I don't know that it ceased to be fun. It's just different problems.
Yeah.
So where you're like building and you're like in the trenches and it's like, everybody and you're kind of like everybody's hanging out. That's at 30 or at 10. You're like at 300, you're hanging out with the leadership team and it's a totally different dynamic. And so, and you see that at kind of every inflection point, and we were along for that for a long time, and kind of got to witness that. And it takes different tolls along the way. But and there were lots of people that came to us over the years to ask us if we want to sell, and they would say, their number one question would be like, "Are you tired?" Like this is like a good.
It's like, do I look tired? Is that what?
I would always say like, "No, I'm not tired. I'm on a rocket ship." Like, that's
having a blast.
And we're having a blast. Whether that was true or not is not important.
It was true. It was true sometimes, and then other times it was.
And so, I think a lot of people get tired, and it's okay to be tired. I think
Yeah.
We didn't sell because we were tired. We sold because we had an amazing deal at the right time. You kind of like always want to sell it at what Jason Limkin, I'll steal it from him, would describe as a local maximum, meaning like if you're at a maximum peak of value now, it might be that you're not going to be back to that peak for another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And so like if you're there today, on a time-adjusted basis, you might want to sell. Not because you're tired, not because you don't believe it's going to get here, but because like if that's going to take 5 years.
When that happens, you feel more confident about your business than ever. You don't want to sell because you're like, oh, I'm riding high.
I still got there's
We
still room.
have so much to do, and that's probably the right time to sell at times.
Interesting.
Because that's when the most value is. You know,
And so you want to sell at a peak, and
it's easy to sell when you're not
Yeah.
excited about the future. You know, I think that like that is usually the case. Where you're like, I am tired. Please take the company. At that point, you've just devalued the company.
and you just get
Right,
taken
right.
advantage of. Yeah, exactly.
So one thing that pops in my head and popped into my head when I first heard about the WP Engine acquisition is
You're like,
obviously
this is amazing.
that was the first thing. Well,
Oh my gosh, I don't have to awkwardly see Dusty and Rick and tell them that I host with WP.
Yeah, that was actually, that's true. So sidebar, the developer, our like Bright Mix, the guys at Plum Web Strategy, they're always been WP Engine guys. And it's like, no, we should do Flywheel. I'm like, oh no, we do WP Engine. And it's like, yay, we do Flywheel now. That's great.
I didn't say hi to Dusty and Rick at the coffee shop now.
That's right. I don't have to avoid him awkwardly anymore. That's
funny.
felt a lot better. But obviously, and for anyone who's thinking about selling their company, they're probably going to be most favorable to their competition. Like the chance of you getting bought by someone who is a competitor of you is probably the chances are probably pretty good. Was there a feeling of like, oh man, we're selling out, or with WP Engine at all, or was it kind of like no, this we're different in some ways, and this makes sense?
Well, I think number one, interestingly enough, we'd run the math. Like we'd been like, who's going to buy us? We're like, would Adobe buy us? Would Microsoft buy us? Or would Adobe, you go down the list of like, would some big private equity firm buy us? Like we'd never, ever were we like, man, maybe WP Engine would buy us.
Really?
Never.
Why?
I think in part because of point number 2, which is like we were just in the trenches with him. If you like, we were walking around the office today, and we're like the sales team was like in that corner, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
You're like all day, every day. Like WP Engine's number 1, we're number 2. All day, every day. Our job was to sell against WP Engine.
You're selling against them
They're like
every
the
day.
bad guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, we had salespeople that like we kind of surprised everyone with the sale. Of course, you can't tell the teams until it's done. And I remember like our top sales rep coming up to me after we made the announcement, being like, "I don't know what to do now." Like we.
Yeah,
like
I get it.
I don't have.
I get it.
I don't. Like,
Yeah.
Wait, they're the good guy now.
Yeah,
And so
Yeah.
And so like there's
No,
this.
I totally get it.
There's like that's the kind of like the weirdest thing about selling to competitors. Like yesterday we were enemies, but now I got to convince the team that we're friends.
How did you do it, or did you do it?
Well, I
like,
think
what? How did that go?
As long as you have like a healthy respect, I think it's the culture that you build internally where like competitors aren't necessarily
Bad.
meant to be bad.
Sure.
In a lot of ways, they do great things for you because they push you, and I think the WP Engine certainly did that. We had different segments of the market, they were kind of up in the enterprise a little bit, or at least, upper market. And we were selling to freelancers and small creative agencies. And so that worked well, but we still ran into them all the time. But I ran the sales team for a long time. It wasn't about like, WP
They're so
Engine's
shitty.
terrible.
Like,
It was more like, there's differences here, and when you come together, if you've actually built that culture where you have a really strong respect for this competitor,
Then it's
can,
easier.
You can say, hey, like, look how amazing we can build things together now. Like, we can run this market, and I think that's kind of what we did. And I think in a different culture where it's a little bit more, I think it's very easy to lead people with an enemy,
Oh yeah, for
and,
sure.
And that certainly wasn't what we did with WP Engine. WP Engine was never an enemy. It was a healthy respect. And if it wasn't
you
enemy,
need
it
that
would've been harder.
competition. You need that edge. Like we've done that before. People that like they're not even really our enemy, or like, but it's still fun to be like, we got to do better than so and so, or what's so and so doing, and like
That's
we just
healthy.
gotta a healthy sense of competition.
Yep, that's
not bad.
So I think that all of that, selling to the competition is a good outcome. I think we have competing and overlapping products. So then you're kind of like, it creates a sense after the fact of like, okay, like what now?
Yeah.
But overall, I think that's right. I think that, and if you look at it just from a pure market share perspective, I think it's really smart, because if you're number one and number two in the market and you combine forces, then you're in a really, and you serve different segments like Flywheel did. And I think it's really smart. I think like the fact that we never considered it, I think it kind of speaks to the fact that you're just building a company and
shows us how naive we were.
Yeah, we're dumb. Like we're just a couple of
just like we were like WP Engine of all people. Like
you're like Microsoft, Adobe.
Yeah. Like we're like,
I would have thought.
But we did have a ton of respect. We had a ton of respect for the CEO, and we had a ton of respect for the company and the founder, like Jason Cohen, the founder. I mean.
He's brilliant.
He's brilliant. We'd loved his blog and his writing for years, and it was fun. It was fun to get to meet him and hang out with him and become friends with him. Like all these things. So if you can find a competitor that is like that, then it's a really good. I think it can be a really good outcome.
So you announced that this is happening, to the whole team, and then to the world. What's life like after that point? You guys stayed there for a bit, and then how long did you guys stay before you exited?
I think life after the acquisition, certainly the announcement, it's a little bit surreal. Like you've been tied to this thing for many years of your life, and
part of your identity in some ways.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me, and I had never worked really anywhere else. I mean, I worked at BrightMix for about a year, and this was it for me. So it's a tough transition. Trying to be a good steward to the acquisition, of course. Like I was very bought into what WP Engine was going to do with the company, and over the course of maybe the first almost 12 months, we operated separately, kind of as a division and hands off. So that was easy enough. But then you start integrating, and you're trying to build a strategy together, and we helped the teams through that process. I think that that was the one thing that we were most concerned about is this is we have people that have built their careers at our company.
Oh, sure.
So making sure that they felt confident in what WP Engine was going to do with the product, what their vision was for the market, even just like how they're going to treat employees, all these types of things. That was most important. And I think that we had kind of as a leadership team made a pact that this is the most important thing, is leading our teams through this transition.
Oh yeah.
Which was about 12 months after the company got acquired.
Yeah, 12 to 18 months. And I think, we didn't need to stay. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like lots of people are like, how long did you need to stay? And, it depends. Different acquisitions work out differently in terms of how that works. But there was no real, there's no handcuffs. There's no reason to be there. Like, we were there for the teams, and we were there to make sure that this thing that we built would find a good landing and a good home. And, that, like to Rick's point, that process took about, 12 or 18 months. And, by 18 months, it's credit to the Flywheel leadership team, I think, and the entire team mostly. Like I would say that most of the team was there through that transition. And the Flywheel leadership team was entirely there for almost 18 months. And then, kind of all left. I think everybody was like, it's in a good spot. And then, 10 people on the Flywheel leadership team kind of all left at the same time, kind of knowing that it was in a really good spot.
So you sell, and you guys, after 12 to 18 months, you guys have exited. Do you guys take a bunch of time off before you did anything else? Like, what did you just traveled, or, what, you just sleep for a few months or cry? Like what do you do? What do former founders do? Or had you already started your next company? You can't give it up.
I'm cursed.
You're broken.
So my wife would have said, take a year off. Right?
Yeah. My wife would have said the same.
Yeah, and it's probably the right answer, to be honest. But that wasn't what I did. I was working on a company called Workshop right now. It's Dusty's involved in that. He's an investor. He's on the board. And his workshop's helping companies, pretty large companies, thousands of employees, build, more engaged and aligned teams through internal comms solutions. So working with their internal communications teams to build really great engaging content for their teams. And really through the lens of the world's different now. Like text-based and, digital communication is super important for these teams all over the world now. Thousands of employees, lots of them fully remote. So that's kind of what came out of my experience at WP Engine, was seeing this problem firsthand and wanting to like attack that thing.
Yeah.
I took 0 days off. I literally quit WP Engine, and the next day I started building it again.
You're broken, man.
So,
no.
I wouldn't recommend
Your
it.
wife
I wouldn't
crying
recommend it.
in the corner.
But
Rick.
But I will say that she still gives me crap about it. But I always say,
As she should.
if you fast forward 12 months from now and you think about, man, I'd love to be here in life. Start right now, because I'm so happy. 2 years has went by. It's been a hard 2 years building a new company. You forget what it's like to be at the ground floor again, but man, I'm so glad that we started 2 years ago, because we're so far more down the road.
Yeah.
So I don't regret it, but yeah, I didn't take a day off. I'm wired weirdly, I guess.
Dusty, how about you? What you exit, and then
I think that I thought I needed something else. Like, and you have a lot of people in your ear saying like, "Well, you're an entrepreneur. You're an entrepreneur. You started all these things.
What's next?
Like, what's next? What's next?"
Yeah.
And
even I was saying that.
Yeah, even Rick's saying that. Like, it's like no shit. It's like so.
You're like the devil on his shoulder.
100%. Like, hey, let's build something. We're gonna build again.
And and you sort of like get into it and you realize like, man,
It's funny.
I built Brightmix and Triple Seat, and they both have, Triple Seat's done very well, and Flywheel did very well, of course, and but it takes a toll, and so then I think that me personally, what I realized is that my job towards the end of Flywheel had gotten to the point where I was not doing much day-to-day work at all, and instead was focused on strategy and on teams and on kind of like helping to align people or whatever it is, and just provide sort of edit and provide snippets of kind of inspiration or whatever it might be. And if you think about starting something over again, that's not the job. Actually, the job in the early days is like, it's a grind and it's doing work, and I don't believe that I have that in me again. And I'm not actually, and that's okay, because I don't think it's actually where I'm most useful, right? Like, the world has moved on in lots of ways, and there's lots of people that are hungrier and that are more driven and that have more energy to do those things. And so, but that took some work. Like, I thought, like, for sure, like, yes, I'm just going to start something else again, or like, we'll go do this or whatever. And what you find is, like, for me, like, I like investing. I like being on boards. I get to work with Rick and the team on like strategy stuff. I get to work with my friend Karen at Alpaca. I get to work with my friend Aaron at Pet Friendly. You get to be involved in these companies at a level that I'm probably best suited for. And then I get to spend a lot of time with my family. And
I mean, you went from Brightmix to Silicon Prairie News to Triple Seat to Flywheel over the course of, 15 years?
15 years.
Yeah, I mean, like...
Wow.
And it's all the life of the entrepreneur, right? So it's like, it's all 100% on. And my problem is also, like, people talk about work-life balance, and I don't have that gene. Like, so... it's not my fault. Like, it's like just my genes,
This is
man.
the way you're
like,
made.
it's and so
genes.
I got bad genes or good genes. I don't know. Like, I don't know.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And so like I have a thing where I'm like 110% or zero, and so anyway, so that's how I've thought about it. The evolution of that, where you're like, you go from, you should definitely do this because that's what people are telling you, that's what you think your identity is or whatever it is, to the point where like, now, man, I get to take my daughter to school, I get to work out, I get to pick her up, and I get to like help my friends build cool companies, and like, that's pretty good.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Hopefully they make me a lot more money.
I'm working on it.
Nice. So what are all the different companies that you're working with right now? You said Alpaca.
Well, I invest in a bunch. Investing is super interesting. It's like, you get to kind of dabble in a lot of different things, but you don't get to help very much in a lot of cases. But there's like four companies I work with that I am sort of material invested in, and then can be, I think, more helpful. And one, of course, is Workshop, and two is Pet Friendly. My friend Aaron Shaddy runs a pet wellness company, wellness subscription company. John Henry Mueller is there, as we talked about, to kind of bring it full circle. A company called Vidanix, which is in the kind of law enforcement and child advocacy SaaS company space. And Alpaca, which my friend Karen runs, is a subscription boxes that support teachers. And so, it's like that stuff it's kind of, like I said, I get to talk smart, and then have lunch, and then be like, well, good luck.
Is that what you always dreamed?
I don't know what I always dreamed. I was a software engineer. I like writing code. I bought a 3D printer, man. Like, now I get to work on my 3D printer. Like,
okay. So that's how you scratch that itch.
Like I'm a problem solver in that way. I like tinkering, but what did I always dream? Like I never dreamed this. Like, this was, I was a software engineer. And so, so you kind of take it a day at a time in a bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I think of you, like, obviously I kind of first saw you with the Silicon Prairie News, big Omaha sphere, as like kind of a more of an inspirational type, leader of people and stuff. And I never thought of you so much as a, software engineer, I guess. So to me, it's not super surprising that you're in this role where you're like able to help guide and shape and, that kind of a thing.
That's fair. And I think that does sort of lend itself. The Silicon Prairie News days are that in a lot of ways. Like, I think it's sort of, bringing people together and helping them be successful, I think is good. We spent many years out of that at Flywheel, right? Like, heads down. Like, I didn't pay any attention to that while we were building a company. And so, it's fun to be back in that and, helping people realize their own success, I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. What's something you guys are looking forward to this year? Anything? Personal, professional?
I think that the work-life balance thing is something that I have a better respect for. This time around, building a software company, and I think that what we lacked at Flywheel, we made up with just by working longer hours. Less experience means you just work harder.
We're like 25 though. Like,
oh yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like, it's so interesting.
Totally. Like, you didn't even have those other poles. So I've really enjoyed kind of this balance in my life around building something that I'm very passionate about and putting the time at work. And then I have a family as well, and coming home and trying to shut off and enjoy that. And like trying to be healthy in every aspect of life. And I don't think that was true 10 years ago necessarily. So yeah, I think that Workshop's doing well. So like I'm looking forward to like a fun year building a company and just believing in the process. And then also just like going home, enjoying family time. And I think that's possible. I think there's lots of, worlds in which that, some people might disagree with that. Or like, again, when you're younger, when you're younger, I think that it's hard to do that because you don't even, I feel like if Dusty were to build a company.
You're also dumber when you're younger. So like
exactly.
You actually like make up for it with hard work.
100%.
And so like now that you're older, you can actually have more family time because you just are smarter.
Also, one problem that people have, I think, and you see it in scaling companies is, you hear it. It's a cliche. Like, should I be the smartest person in the room? Of course not. Like that's what like. But I think a lot of people actually have a visceral kind of like response to that, where like I don't want to not be the smartest person.
Yeah.
If you can actually accept that and build a great team, it's really fun to just like be a part of this experience, and it doesn't require you to work 80 hours a week if you have the team around you. And you believe in really strong delegation and working with the team in like strategic ways. So I'm excited about just kind of a healthy year, building a company and working on something I'm very passionate about, making progress,
Yeah, and I imagine too, like, when you're younger in the early days, your first thing, there's an urgency too there, or like kind of a feast or famine kind of a thing where, there's a lot, at least for me, I remember when I started Fruitful, we had literally nothing, and it's like we were living from contract to contract, and it was like there was just so much at stake that there's a level of stress there that you would never want to replicate. And then now, looking back 10 years, it's like we're in a much more stable spot, and like there's so much, there's just much better support, more hands on deck.
For what it's worth, like if you ask my wife, she would say I still work too much. It's like I'm opening my laptop last night at 9, like answering emails, and it's like it's what I enjoy doing. It's not like
I'm doing this for fun. Okay,
Yeah,
this is my hobby.
While she watches TV on 100-inch television.
What more do you want? What more do you want?
Frame TV, though.
Frame TV. That's the size of a small house.
But I think the difference is that it's not required, right? I think that like at Flywheel during the scale up kind of phase, like there was no other answer. We tell the story often about how we were a hosting company, so like half of the value in our product was doing support for customers. If you emailed and you had a question about WordPress or our servers, like we had to answer those. That was part of the product. For the first 4 years of the company, me, Dusty, and Tony literally did 12, 24-hour shifts or whatever, doing support. So overnight, I would sleep on the couch, and I'm sure Dusty did the same because my wife kicked me out of the bedroom. I'd sleep on the couch. I'd have an alarm on my phone. If someone sent an email in at 2 a.m., it would buzz me, and I still have PTSD every time I get that alarm on my phone. And we'd wake up and we'd answer tickets. So we typically, for 1 week at a time, each of us would work from about 1 to 7 a.m. For 4 years.
These are the good old days.
The good old days.
That's what they call that.
I think it's the stuff that people don't see. Actually, is the reality in that. That's the work that's required at that age. But I think to Rick's other point, like
we could have been a little bit more strategic about that.
I don't know. Like we didn't have any money. Like all you had is we were young and dumb, man.
Like, maybe not.
Well, all you had was the thing is like in the early days, all you have is time and grit. Like those are the things that you have. Yep. And now, I mean, you're dumb but you're like you've got time and grit. Like those are the things. And then now at this age, I see others who have left Flywheel to go on to do great things, have similar paths. Is you can be smarter about it in part because because of one's success, you have access to more money.
Yeah, that's true.
And so with money, you can buy, you can afford better and more team members, of course. And so like you get that luxury, I think now in a way that, when you're in your 20s and you're starting your first thing and you
haven't
proven nothing. Like you like the only thing you have is your ability to work hard. And
100%.
And I think Flywheel certainly is a story of absolute hard work that turned out, I think, pretty well.
Well, Dusty, Rick, thanks so much for being on Growing a Fruitful Brand. What's the best way for people listening to follow you guys today?
Do you even use Twitter these days?
Oh man,
Do you tweet?
What's the latest?
That's good.
Are you on TikTok? Are you?
I would say I'm working on a company called Workshop here in Omaha. I'm trying to build a cool software company in Omaha again. So follow Workshop.
Useworkshop.com. Is that right?
Useworkshop.com.
Yeah, check it out. Especially if you're a big company. It's probably not ideal for a company of 10 employees.
But I know that people that are listening, friends that work at big companies, holler at them.
I'm Dusty D on Twitter. I don't post or do anything, but I'm on Twitter constantly. So you
can follow me.
You can follow me.
It's very exciting.
You can send me a message.
But its podcast is coming out soon.
That's right. We'll definitely keep you all posted. But thanks so much, you guys. If you found today's show helpful, don't forget to subscribe and consider sharing it with someone who might also enjoy it. If you'd like to work with Fruitful on a branding, website, or messaging project of your own, you can always reach out on our website, fruitful.design. So until next time, don't forget to grow something good.